to talk about today, though, given where the world is and where a lot of our heads are, is to take a step back and look at how you build a brand, and really importantly, how you lead a global brand in the world today. And at least to just give some insights that I've had on how I approach leading Lenovo through all these different times. So I hope some of it is interesting and relevant, if not all of it. So let me talk first about the world, because I think before we get into brand leadership, I think it's important to kind of frame up the challenge a lot of us are facing. And I think the one side of the equation in the world is that the world of brand has changed pretty dramatically over the last 10 years. I think brand used to be the logo, the color palette, the font, and to some extent the advertising that you ran. I think today brand is everything, and it's challenging, because what that means is the brand is really the impact you have on every audience. So whether it's your actual audience you're advertising to or talking to, your employee base, your analysts, your investors, the role of brand really impacts each of those. It's every touch point. And I think, as everyone here knows intimately, there are too many touch points out there for any human or any team to wrap their head around. And so that level of, we need to talk to everyone, we need to talk through every touch point, and we need to talk to them everywhere. So we go to market in 180 different countries, and we have to think about the impact that our brand has in each of those 180 countries. And what that leaves you with as the leader of the brand is a general sense of panic, because there's no way that you could possibly think through all these things. And as you kind of compound that with the world today, if the brand is everything, the reality, said in shorthand, is that everything's a mess. And the world itself is too complex right now. And obviously the pandemic is an incredibly challenging time, but even pre-pandemic, the level of complexity in the world is too much for brands to wrap their head around. The world is moving too fast. I think the changes that we see in the geopolitical space, the changes that we see in marketing, are moving too fast, and everything is too transparent. So any move you make as a brand gets hyper-analyzed the moment that you make it. And the challenge is we're in the middle of that. So as brand leaders, we're looking at it saying, what we do is incredibly important to the company, and it's everything. It can be as broad as everything to the company, yet the world in which we do it is a mess. And so how do we tackle that? And I think the good news is that the solution is not complicated, in the sense that it's not about going and doing a volume of things. The solution is leadership, in my mind. And as a brand leader, how you actually conduct yourself, how you lead your team, how you lead your brand matters more than anything else that you could possibly do. And it matters more than ever. I think in these incredibly turbulent times, companies and teams and people are looking for leaders who truly have a point of view on how to lead, have a point of view on the brand, and have a point of view on the world outside. So I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership, about brand leadership, and give you some principles that I follow, that my team follows, in the hopes that they start to either inspire you, steer you, or at least just give you a bit of a roadmap for where we head. So let's talk first about the role of a global brand leader. And this in some senses could be a role of a leader in any discipline. But to me, I've spent a lot of time thinking and practicing how to apply this to branding. And there are three roles that you have. And this is, this came, to give credit where it's due, this came from a discussion that we had at one point when Satya Nadella from Microsoft was really in the midst of the transition he was driving. This came from a discussion that we had with him in a small group about how he approaches leadership. And I took so much away from that, modified it a bit, but really believe that he's onto something, and obviously has been successful. And the first role, the first element that a leader has to have as you look at this complex world, is to bring clarity, to bring clarity to the company, to bring clarity specifically and importantly to your team, so that they really understand where to focus. In a world where there's too much to focus on, your job is to bring clarity and focus to that team. And I'll talk in a bit about, an approach to do that. The second area is to create energy. I think one of the things we see a lot is that in this complex, fragmented world, it's very easy to get paralyzed. It's very easy to try to overanalyze everything that's going on and to lose momentum. A second part of your role as a leader is to push from the back, almost to drive that energy, to get that team moving forward, even if it's not 100% guaranteed in the right direction, to just drive some momentum. And the third, obviously, is to deliver success. It's to drive those positive outcomes, which is probably the hardest part of the job. But that at the level of a global brand leader is what the organization looks to you to deliver. So let me talk about each of these areas quickly. I think the idea of bringing clarity, this is the most important of the three. If you focus on nothing else, to me as a leader, it is how do you pick the right battles for your team? Because if you don't, you can generate energy, you can drive outcomes, but it'll be the wrong energy against the wrong outcomes. So this idea of figuring out how to really pick your battles is something really critical. I know from working in a global organization, we don't lack people asking us to do things. We don't lack projects. We lack the ability sometimes to clearly see which are the right ones to focus on. And I'll just show you the technique we use. We look at everything as most good things in the world in this kind of matrix. And it's a pretty typical effort to impact matrix, but the way we look at it as a team is to say, there's four areas. There's things that we're really good at that are core competencies of ours, and there are things that are foreign to us as a team, that if we're asked to do it, we could probably figure it out, but we don't really know how to do it. And then in terms of, sorry, I've got those backwards. That should be effort. But, oh, no, it's right. In terms of impact, there are things that if we do them, even if we do them exceptionally well, they're going to drive minimal impact in the world. And then there are things that are game changers. And not surprisingly, upper right quadrant, we're all in as a team. Anytime we identify something that is right in our sweet spot that we know we can nail and will be a game changer for the company and the brand, that's obvious. We go all in. Those are few and far between. There also are quite a few things that we don't know how to do. And even if we did figure out how to do it, we'd probably have minimal impact. And as my teenage kids like to say, that's a hard no. And so and those are relatively easy as well, because everyone agrees that we're probably not the right team to do it. The challenging ones are in the corners. So when we find something that's truly a game changer for the company, but we don't know how to deliver it efficiently, we tend to outsource it. And what that means, when I say all in the upper right, we do that ourselves. We have an in-house capability that spans everything from strategy all the way through to production. And so all in, we do ourselves. Outsource, we find the right partner. And this is where our agencies play a really critical role for us, is figuring out of those things, when we identify that something's a game changer for our company, but we don't know how to do it, we go out and find the right partner. We do this heavily in the measurement space, in really looking at how do you tie brand performance to business outcomes. That's a game changer for us, because if we can do that, then we can start to build the investment cases and get the right level of funding behind the brand. We do that if we're going to the Super Bowl. If we're looking at saying, all right, we're going to go in and advertise in the Super Bowl as an example, we would outsource that. We don't necessarily have the capabilities in-house to do that level of production. We can do parts of it, but we would outsource that as well. So really identifying something as a game changer, but having the self-reflection to realize that we're not the best in the world at doing that, we outsource that. And then if we find something that is a true core competency of ours, but really is going to have minimal impact, we play the long game on that. If we look at something that is, doing this activation around a product that is not critical to the success of our company, but we have a killer idea for how to do it, and we want to go and do it, We do it to win awards. We do it to drive favor internally. We do it to motivate the internal team. We do it to play the long game, to say this won't change the needle or move the needle on the brand today, but it'll keep our internal teams motivated, or it'll get others within the company to feel like we're strong at what we do, or it will win us awards, which ultimately helps to drive motivation. So on these things, we still take on the projects, even if they have minimal impact, if we know that we can hit it out of the park, because ultimately there's a tangential effect that it has. So this is how we look at it. And we spend quite a bit of time and have a pretty rigorous process when we're asked to do something at how we screen it against this criteria, and then how we make sure that we're aligning resources to the above the line work in the blue and the green. Second area is creating energy. And I think this is a surprising one for a lot of people, but where I think we as leaders generate a lot of energy is in the culture that we build as a team. So this isn't about, all right, how do you go put a fire under people to make sure that they're motivated? This is about how do you build a team that people want to work on for the long term? How do you build a team of respect? How do you build a team where people aren't afraid to fail? And I think that if you build that culture properly, then there's an ability to really have a team that self-motivates, that at the end of the day, on their hardest day, still is motivated to come to work. So I look at the culture as kind of the baseline motivator and energy creator. I think there's also the story you tell. And it'd be easy to say the vision you have or the vision you lay out. But I think in this complicated of a world, I almost feel like the idea of a singular vision isn't enough to drive the kind of energy and momentum that you need to truly get these big, complex initiatives off the ground. You need a story, and you need to be able to tell it really effectively. And when I look at who on my team are the highest performers, who are the ones who are really driving the energy of the team, it's generally the people who understand how to tell a story, who understand how to paint a vision for where we're going, whether it's a project that's internal, that's about fixing our, process issues, or it's about pitching the latest massive campaign that we're taking out to 180 markets. We need people who really understand how to tell that story and bring others along with them. And then the third, and again, a bit jarring because the other two are sort of big high-level things. As a company or as a team, you need to compensate people properly. You need performance-based compensation. Nothing creates energy like knowing that you're going to receive a significant pay rise if you nail a KPI, or a significant bonus if you nail a KPI. And again, I don't think that compensation could sit by itself and generate energy. That would be a short-term thing. You need the right culture on the team. You need people who really understand how to mesmerize people with the story and the vision and to bring people along with them. And then you need to pay people properly. You need to pay them for the performance that they deliver. And you need them to recognize that if we don't deliver, we're not going to get paid as well as we could. So I think the three things here, in order to inspire energy, these three have to work together. And they're all the responsibility of the leader, whether it's setting the culture, telling the story, or setting up the comp structure. If you do these three things, you're going to have a team that has that where we always say, the wheel is spinning at a regular basis. Like we're moving forward. The energy level is high at all times, and you can spike it when you need to. And then the last thing is delivering success. So this is once you've got a team that's in place that is properly motivated, that is focused on the right things, how do you as an individual, as a leader, go in and what are the three things you focus on as you start each day? To me, what I focus on is issue resolution. It's, how do you see things coming first and avoid them, see problems coming? And then when you miss one and the team is mired in some sort of issue, how do you unblock it? So this is the role that I feel I have, is to stand at the front. Like I said, see things coming, make sure we avoid them as a team, and then figure out how to go in with the team and help unstick us from the issues. And generally, it's the leader who does this best, because you have the relationships that enable you to do it. You have the perspective that others may not have to see things coming. And so this is a really, really key role. The second thing, and this is, my bias because I ski a lot, but the critical thing is to keep the team's skis pointed downhill. I think it's really easy to get distracted and to start kind of, slaloming across the course too much and going at shiny objects. I think part of my job is, once we've got some momentum, to keep everyone focused on the finish line and to keep everyone just knowing that at the end of the day, we may be bobbing and weaving, but that's the direction we're pointing, and we're all heading in the same direction. We always say, even if we can't get everyone in the same boat rowing together, at least we'll have multiple boats and they're all rowing in the same direction is the goal. And then the last element is to be loud and proud. And this is, a term I used with my kids when they were growing up, when they were speaking to adults and starting to, talk in groups. It was really about, how do you go out there and really champion your message? And as the brand leader in the company and the brand leader externally on a stage, how do you make sure that you're championing your team, that your team looks at you and feels like you're proud of them, you've got their back, and you're recognizing their accomplishment and yelling them as loud as you possibly can? So these are the three things. Like I said, once you get a team focused and really, really pointed at the right issues, and then you start to draw that energy as a leader. When I come to work every day, which involves today going down in my basement, but when I show up for work every day, these are the three things that I always look at. How do I see it coming and make sure we as a team avoid whatever issue is heading our way? How do I make sure that we're all pointed in the right direction? And those are little adjustments and sometimes big adjustments. And then how do I make sure I'm taking every opportunity to tell the company, to tell the industry, when necessary, to tell our customers or our analysts what we're doing with the brand, and to be the biggest cheerleader, the biggest spokesperson for the success that we're driving. So that was quick. I would normally spend an hour kind of going into more detail, but I wanted to at least leave you with that. And I think I thought a lot about how to talk about this increasingly fragmented world that we're all in. And like I said at the start, I think it would be, none of it's easy, but I could have come in and talked about the technology that we're using as a brand to help navigate this, about visual identity and how we drive consistency of look and feel, about the partners that we choose and which agencies we decide to work with who are really savvy about doing this. All of that is important. But at the end of the day, to me, if you could focus on one thing, whether you're the CEO of a company looking at who should run your brand, whether you're leading a brand, whether you're an agency partner who's working with a brand lead, the most important thing for helping brands navigate this world is leadership, and the leadership of the person who is actually running the organization. And again, just one more time, I think the three key things that leader has to do, most critical: pick your battles. Next, build a culture that inspires energy and make sure you pay your people properly for that performance. And then the last one is really focus on delivering success, both leading from the front and looking at how you enable the team to avoid those obstacles, but also then really focusing on that recognition and being the big cheerleader for your brand as you go into the world. So let me pause there. I know we're going to go into a discussion and a fireside chat on this. So Hayley, I don't know if you want to jump in or whether I should just keep talking at this point.
Hi, Quinn. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And this is a perfect jumping off point. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
I hope your team is watching, because I feel like it's necessary to comment on the fact that you have done a stellar job at making people feel like you're speaking directly to them. Mm-hmm. And I know how hard that is when you're on Zoom. So I thought I would just point that out and let you know that I appreciated it, listening to you speak. Nice. Yeah. So this was a great presentation, super helpful for me in understanding a little bit more about you and what you're focused on at Lenovo. For the purpose of the next, I don't know if it were like 25 or 30 minutes, I thought what we might do is break the conversation up into 3 focus areas. We'll continue to build off this presentation since we've got the momentum around this conversation. So focus on leadership and marketing. we might talk a little bit about you and getting to know you because you're so well respected in the industry. I think it'd be beneficial for people watching to hear a little bit about your story. And then I thought we might talk about some perspective on 2021 since we're at the beginning of a new year and we've got lots going on.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I just want to say to everyone, I am wide open to any questions you've got. So if we don't cover it in those three areas, just put it in the chat and we'll try to get to it.
Perfect. And just, jumping off from where you started, you were talking about how leadership is the most important thing, or brand is the most important thing, and leadership is essential for driving brand. My first question to you is, do you feel like most CEOs know this and really do appreciate the role that brand plays
No.
in the health of an organization?
No, I don't think they do. I don't think there's a clear view in the C-suite, and particularly with CEOs, of a fundamental definition of brand. And I don't mean literally like a dictionary definition, but I think most CEOs probably say that brand is a subset of marketing, and it really is about positioning statement and then the look and feel. And they don't see it as the sum total of all the experiences that everyone has with your company, your products, and your people. So I don't think they see that. I don't think they have that full picture. And I think it's part of the leadership role here is selling that vision up so that the C-suite in your company really understands when we talk about brand, particularly when we argue that we need to invest in brand. Why is that? Why is it not just let's go hire a design agency to rethink the visual identity, but instead is really about looking at how we drive our reputation in the world, which ultimately drives our stock price and other things that the CEO truly cares about. So I think you hit on it exactly. I think that's one of the biggest challenges as brand marketers we face is that senior level executive understanding and buy-in.
So the obvious next question is, how do you convince a CEO or the C-suite that this is most important? And of course, that's going to look different for every organization and probably in every single industry as well. So any top line thoughts or advice for things people might do apart from bringing in outside consultants to help, underscore the importance of brand?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two angles to it. I think there's a very quantitative angle that you can take on it, which is really drawing a correlation between the work that we naturally do as brand marketers and the outcomes that we naturally drive, and the things that the CEO and the board care deeply about. And we've had a lot of experience with that and figuring out how we drive a correlation between reputation, which we can measure and tie directly to the work that we do on the brand side, and share price, which is what the C-suite and the board care deeply about. We've looked at how things like purchase intent, which is something that we know we can impact with the brand. Someone wanting, after they experience have a positive brand experience, they're more likely to buy your products. We can do that, we can influence that, and we can track that. But how do you tie that to revenue and market share? Same with brand premium. We know that we can build a more premium image of the brand. We can convince people that the brand is worth more than you originally thought. How do we tie that to margin and to the increase in profit? So there's a quantitative side of it where we're drawing that correlation, and we've got agency partners who are really skilled at doing that. And then there's a qualitative side of it, which it gets back to that storytelling, which is really, and it's, walking into a boardroom saying, oh, I'm going to, go tell a story isn't always the most confidence inspiring, but the ability to go in and really say, let me paint a picture of who we're talking to. Let me paint a picture of who we are today. Let me paint a picture of who we could be and how that will ultimately change how people think about us. That ability to take very business-oriented, essentially non-marketing, non-brand thinkers into that creative space and get them to start thinking about the possibility of what you could do. That's the softer side, but equally critical, because that emotional side helps pull you through any doubts they have, or any, putting their fingers in the data and saying, prove this to me. That emotional side can sometimes give you the benefit of the doubt in those situations.
Right. So I agree with that. And now I have another question. I think there are probably a lot of marketers tuning in here. Is the marketing funnel dead?
Is the marketing funnel dead?
In
Uh,
other words, if you're going to go in and emphasize the importance of brand and that leadership position, where does the marketing funnel live relative to that, or does it not at all?
so I'll give you a candid point of view. The marketing funnel is alive and well. And if you go and talk about it, you will seem really old and outdated. So what I mean by that is I think that that tried and true view of the funnel still works. Absolutely. And it's a really good, again, in this complex world that we live in, simplifying it down to that level really helps you focus on where you're going and what you need to do. I think if you go in and talk about the marketing funnel, you're going to seem like a marketer, which to a business audience can be challenging, and you're going to be branded as a bit old school. I think if you go in and talk about the customer journey and really start to translate that into language of customer journey, key touch points, desired actions coming out of each touch point, and essentially start to use a bit more modern language and language that translates better to a business audience, you'll be there. But to me, it's kind of the same principle. And I think it's easy to get completely overwhelmed and confused in the customer journey discussion because there's so many touch points, so many customer segments, all of that. You bring it back to the fundamental marketing funnel and the basics of how good marketing is done in private amongst your team and use that to structure how you think about things. And I think you can be really effective.
Right. I think that's well said. So the fundamentals or the traditional notion of it and the structure is still very relevant, but what's changed is the language and all the different touch points because
Correct.
we're obviously in modern times.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit about how everything is a mess in the world today. I'm not sure anybody on this call would disagree with you, although obviously depending on one's outlook, you might feel better or worse about the prospects for the future. It's interesting. Actually, somebody called me the other day and he said, do you have a quick second? I just have to tell you, how much I appreciate the Atlantic and the role that it's playing in the world today. When society is fraying, people really need strings to grab onto, and that's what the Atlantic is doing. And I thought, gosh, you brought such clarity to the mission that we provide. I'm wondering how you provide the same type of clarity for Lenovo, and what is the role that really a company like yours can play in that, right? It's clear, with journalism specifically, the role that you can play in society, but when you are trying to motivate hundreds of thousands of people globally, to go out there and give their best for the company every day. And also you're trying to motivate customers to see that the purpose you're serving is really helping the world. Where is the connective tissue there for you? And how are you bringing that sense of leadership on behalf of Lenovo to kind of simplifying or cleaning up the mess, if you will?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A really good thought your friend had. I like that when society's fraying, you need threads to hang on to. It's nice. I think from our perspective, what we try to, in these times, we try to rise above the customer segments that we've got, the units that we work in, and not talk about the brand in any of those terms. The thing that's working really well for us right now is talking about 4 big areas that are kind of universally important right now: healthcare, education, manufacturing, and the environment. And we play really deeply in each of those. So, our ability to provide our customers with telehealth solutions helps them go and actually be much more effective in treating the pandemic. Distance learning, we provide the hardware, the software, the services around helping schools to figure out distance learning. In the environment, we're the biggest supercomputer company out there. So we're helping a lot of hospitals, a lot of universities and scientists figure out how to predict what's going to come with the environment and how to address it. And then manufacturing, much more for a business audience, obviously, but helping to flex your supply chain to navigate this world we're in. And we've got solutions in all those areas. And so rather than going, product up, we've been really trying to look at it problem down and say, all right, even though we're very focused on the pandemic right now, the environment is still continuing to decay. So let's go out and be quite loud about the work that our customers are doing in helping with that. let's go talk healthcare, education, manufacturing. So trying to keep really focused on those four, trying to keep really focused on problem solution in that space. And then, to be honest, letting the rest of the business go out and sell the individual products. And we just kind of point everyone going, if you're going to talk about anything, talk about one of these four areas.
Right. I love that, because the reality is people are interested in stories that are having an impact, or things that are making a difference. And all of those areas are things that we're experiencing all together now. And so anybody would be interested in the way in which Lenovo is authentically making an impact there, which is great.
And it really bridges. I mean, we always look at, to some extent, there's a consumer side of our business and there's a B2B side of our business. And this is one of those few times where it all comes together. And if you're going out and talking about enabling distance learning, that's talking directly to the IT administrator within a large school system who needs to buy the technology. And then when she goes home at night, that's talking to her as a mom who's trying to figure out how to get her kids online more effectively and keep them motivated while they're at school. So you see, we always say, IT people are humans too. Like, to be able to go and talk to both their business side and their human side with one message is a really cool experience.
Right. I love that. And that feels like the perfect segue to talking a little bit about you. And you mentioned distance learning. You mentioned that you've got a couple of teenagers. Tell us what it's been like working from home during the pandemic. And especially because I think, if I'm not mistaken, you would be over in China and kind of around the world about 4 times a year, or quarterly before this. So what is it like, and how is it communicating globally, from North Carolina?
Yeah, it's probably no different than a lot of people are experiencing. I think there was an initial novelty value at first where I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I've never worked from home. I've never done this. This is really interesting. I'm going to get my home office set up and do all of that. And that lasted about, 2 hours. And then suddenly it was that moment where you go, all right, this is actually kind of cool. Like, I'm getting to spend a lot of time with my family. I'm getting to do a lot more quality stuff with them. And that lasted probably about a month. And still obviously, enjoy spending more time with my family. But I think I have two teenage daughters. And I think my wife and I and my daughters all were like, can't take the dog for another walk. Like, we're starting to go a little insane with this routine. And now we've all settled into our zones. And I think that, the kids are doing well overall, but it's hard. I mean, virtual learning is really challenging. And I think it's going to have a lasting impact on this age of kids who are going through this right now. So that's tough. And then, I miss traveling. I've got teams around the world. I've got a huge team in China, a huge team in India, in addition to the US, and I miss seeing them. There is definitely only about 80% of effectiveness through Zoom. I mean, you miss those nonverbal cues. You miss the warmth, the empathy, you miss the ability to take someone out for dinner or take someone out for a drink and just, go talk to them about what's going on in life. So I think overall good, but definitely ready to be through this thing, as I'm sure everyone on the call is.
Right. Have you done anything interesting over Zoom that has helped to draw people in, or have you guys been doing?
Yeah, we did what I considered one of the worst ideas ever that turned out good. We did a trivia night for our global team, and found a guy out in LA, stand-up comic who's now pivoted to run trivia nights. And I went into it going, this is going to be painful. 2 hours of forced fun. It was fabulous. I mean, it was really, I think everyone was hungry for not getting on the thing and not talking about work. We did it as if you want to have a drink, have a drink. And it was great. I mean, it went more than 2 hours. You saw people's competitive sides come out big time. You learned some really strange stuff about people, and it was really cool. And so we've done that. We've done, bartending classes. We've done all sorts of continuing education stuff. But we've started to do incredibly socially distanced in-person outings where you go and sit like 10 feet apart from each other in a field on a nice day and just see each other. And so we're trying. I don't think we haven't hit any sort of magic thing that's working exceptionally well, but it's a lot of, to be honest, it's a lot of checking in on people. It's a lot of just one-on-ones to make sure, and starting everyone with how are you doing, like,
Yeah.
and really trying to make that not just a segue into the work discussion, but probe a bit. And that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all of us watching here understand that. Um, I can't help but kind of bring up the fact that you thought you were going to be heading into a career in law and
Yeah.
ultimately turned to advertising. And definitely curious to hear your story and any real lessons learned from perhaps trying something and then changing, sort of pivoting, I guess, if that was in fact the word of 2020.
Yeah.
But also, I think what might be helpful too is putting any of those lessons into the context of what it takes to be a CMO today, because I think a lot of people want to understand the sort of central motivations and the foundational building blocks you might need to get there, given that the role is so expansive and that it's changing all the time. And as you said, the fundamentals are there, but you've got to know all of these different things. So give us some good perspective on your career journey and how.
Yeah. I mean, I started out going down the path towards law for completely the wrong reasons. I was enamored with a guy in a TV show and the lifestyle he lived when I was about 12, and thought he was great and drove a Porsche, and I was like, I want that lifestyle. And somehow that kind of super surface, really cheesy view held me all the way through college, pre-law, to the point where I just had this realization and meltdown in midway through college, where I realized I was doing things for completely the wrong reason. And thank God I did, because I would have been a terrible lawyer. But at that point, I kind of had a karmic break, and got a lot of good advice from people around me, fortunately, and got steered into marketing. And actually, I still remember I went to meet with a friend of someone who worked at a big ad agency and fell in love with it. And it was that emotional feeling where I was like, all right, these are my people. Like, there was nothing, I didn't even know what advertising really did, but I was like, okay, yeah. This feel, this vibe, this group, what we're talking about, this feels like something I want to do. And so this was a long time ago. So I wrote a letter to the head of the biggest ad agency in Boston, where I was going to school, and got a job through that. And it was great. I've never looked back. I think I talk a lot to college students who are looking to get into marketing, and I think the biggest advice I give them is, because the questions are always, should I go agency or client side? Should I go big? Should I go small? Should I focus on digital or traditional? Don't worry about any of that. The thing to focus on is, who's your boss? Who's that person who sits directly above you? And look at, can you learn from them? Can you be in the trenches with them, 24 hours a day? Because that's what starting out life is going to be like. Do you ultimately like them? Do you think they're going to have your best interests? And that's starting out. That's what really matters, because at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, whether you're working at P&G as a junior brand manager, or you're at a tiny agency that most people have not heard of, that person is going to have a really formative impact on your career. And a couple of years in, then you can start to go, all right, how do I get into a P&G? How do I get into a Unilever? How do I get into somewhere like that? Or how do I get into an Overzoom or one of these great agencies? But when you're first starting out, just go work for someone really, really kind, really smart, who's going to really help you just to understand how business works and start to introduce you to marketing. And then once you start to get some momentum down a path, that's where I think it's really important to start to build up that skill set, and to never get stuck in one discipline, because that midpoint of your career where you're kind of 5 years into it, it can be quite easy to go, all right, you know what, I'm really good at analytics. I love numbers. I'm great with Excel. I'd rather be in Excel than PowerPoint. And so I'm going to go work for an analytics agency and really specialize on some sort of quant focused thing. If you want to be a global CMO, that is probably not the path to go down at that point in your career. you want to generalize and you want to really be in a position where you see a lot of different aspects. You want to, in a sense, be broad to me, not too deep. And I know I talk a lot about that, and I know it's a relatively controversial way of looking at it. But when I look at the CMOs who are really successful in the world and who I feel have that really well-rounded view, they're the ones who came up with a ton of different experiences: agency side, client side, digital, traditional, analytics, strategy, and dip their toes into all of them. So they really understand, and they don't know a real depth about the things, but they know enough about it to go hire the right people who really are the experts in it.
Right. That's really good advice. So just moving over to perspective on 2021, we're here, of course. We're coming through. We're not quite through the mess that you're describing, but perhaps we see some light at the end of the tunnel. There are a lot of things that are really important to organizations and to customers and to society at large. Everything from brand purpose to customer obsession and with all of the changes, what are your thoughts on what's going to be most important in 2021 and things that you would tell people to focus on or definitely keep an eye on for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I think externally, people are going to be looking for optimism from brands. I think they're going to be looking for the brands who, as the light at the end of the tunnel starts to get a little bit brighter, are the ones who are really painting a positive but realistic view of what's to come, and really showing, to your point earlier, how they authentically fit into that. So I think that people are going to reject, consumers, B2B audiences are going to reject the brands who are just overtly optimistic for no reason or have no association with what they're talking about. And they're going to reject the brands that are just, churning along with their business. They're going to look for that brand that's going, you know what, it's going to be all right. And here's why we say that, because our customers are doing this and we're helping them to do that. And I think if you can stitch that together, which I would argue most companies probably could figure that out, how to do realistic optimism and anchor it in something you're actually providing, that to me is the secret sauce externally. And then internally, the thing we're really looking at with our teams, well, there are two. One is the world of work's fundamentally changed. I don't think that we're ever going to go back to, everyone feels it's mandatory to go into an office, 5 days a week. I think we're going to all start to be able to pick and choose when we go in, when we don't, when we work remote, when we don't. If we're looking at other jobs, start to really look at a much wider range of jobs because you can work them remotely. So I think just being really aware of ensuring that your teams feel like you as a management team are a bit enlightened about that situation and are treating them respectfully, so that as they start to make those decisions. But the other side of that, though, is it's going to be a really hard slog for the next at least 6 months, I think, for people. And I think that for employees, for teams, as they, here, at least here in the US and in a lot of the West, came out of the holidays, really excited about the holidays, getting that break. And then you come into January in the cold, in the dark, and go, all right, we may not see a true light until autumn or maybe next year. And I think there's a real possibility for teams to plummet in terms of morale at that point. So I think really keeping an eye on that's important.
Right. Yeah, all really good points. I think one of the things we worry about too is maintaining a sense of culture, company culture, when you are so, sort of spread out and with people, as you said, having to talk about how they are. People are not necessarily used to bringing their whole selves to work or their personal selves. And now it very much matters, obviously, because there's not really a difference. But it is really interesting to contextualize everything you're talking about, from career journey to the role that leadership and brand are playing, both for the company and the employees, and how there's not really a difference between those people and everybody else out there now. And so I think you've given us some really good fodder to think about and practical advice as well. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I want to make sure we get a chance to bring in some questions from people on the outside. And I don't have anybody here telling me whether or not those questions are going to a specific place, or if I'm going to do it. I see one, so I'll read this out loud here if it's easiest for me to do that. Elliot Rosenbaum with The Trade Desk. I love what you shared about picking the right battles. Can you share an example of a time something was outsourced, which eventually became a core competency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you look 3 years ago at our organization, we outsourced all strategy, all creative, all production. And we had this realization that a lot of the things that were in that top right box that what we said we were all in on, we were all in emotionally on, and then we contracted others to do all of the work. And what we saw was that a lot of our IP, a lot of the strategic thinking about the brand, a lot of the creative thinking about the brand, we were giving to others outside of the firewall. And we wanted to figure out, and what we saw from it was that even the partners who we'd worked with for a long time, who are our top-notch industry partners in strategy and creative, weren't quite getting it. And we'd worked with companies for decades, and they never quite got it. And it took a lot of pushing, a lot of steering to get them there. And what we realized was that carrying the badge, being inside that firewall gives you an access to a way of thinking, to a culture, to the DNA of the company that no matter how close an agency partner is, they never get. Because the moment they come in, they're carrying a visitor badge. People don't engage with them the way that they do. They don't have the access. They don't have a view. They don't feel the company the way we did. So what we did was we made a decision to insource first our strategy function. So our brand strategy, our marketing strategy, our creative strategy, and built that out. Then to insource our creative for the brand and bring that in. And, driven by the pandemic, to insource what I call the simple production. So not the large scale productions we'll continue to outsource, but those in-house, those jobs that we can do in-house. And so it really was looking at it saying some of the thorniest issues that we face as a brand that we know are the real game changers, we're outsourcing. And we need to change that. Now, that's a whole other discussion about how to do that, because it was a lot harder than we thought, and it took a lot longer than we thought. But having come through the other side now, at least on the strategy and the creative front, it was well worth it.
You got it. Thank you. Okay, there's another question here. What are the most salient features customers look for in a computer?
Reliability and security. So, I mean, the people, it hasn't changed. I mean, you want it to be that every time you fire it up, every time you go to it, it works. And that is, it sounds base level, but it's really, really critical. It's always the number one thing. And security. Nowadays, I don't have to explain this, but being able to feel like what you do on your computer truly stays on your computer and doesn't cause problems for you, for the outside, for your employer. Those are the two biggest things. Then you get the value for money. So then you want it to be priced properly. So those are the two we really focus on, are reliability and security, and then figuring out how do we price it in a way that people see as affordable and wow, I'm getting a great deal on this much innovation.
I did write down another question earlier that I wanted to ask you, so I'm glad that we have one more minute so that I can ask you this question. You referenced Satya Nadella, and of course, he's been recognized as one of the great leaders of our generation. Anybody else particularly inspiring or impressive to you on the sort of CEO leadership front, or even CMO leadership front?
Yeah, a person who doesn't necessarily fall into, he's an outside consultant. It's a guy named Simon Sinek. And, I don't generally read the industry books. I don't generally watch those sort of speeches. I got put on to him, and I think he's absolutely brilliant. And the way that I think about branding, the way that I think about marketing, in a lot of ways, the way I think about my career comes from two big things he talks about this concept of starting with why, and about this concept of the infinite game. And, I found he's the only person that, and I don't know him, I've never met him. I just consume his stuff, but he's the only person that I've read and gone, wow, that is actually a fundamentally different way of thinking about life, about work, about career, about marketing, about brand. And just to finish on one point, you asked about how a while ago about how you sell into a CEO who doesn't know about brand. I actually used one of Simon's videos where he talks about the power of why with our C-suite, and it was incredibly powerful to get them to start. Granted, hearing it from someone other than me was good, but also just the simplicity, but yet the power that he talks about it is really good. So if look at Satya's leadership principles, look at Simon Sinek's thinking about the power of why and about the infinite game, and I think they're really powerful.
Love that. Thank you so much, Quinn. I think we are at time, but it's been great to chat, and I really appreciate the presentation you put together too.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Hayley, for the great conversation. Thank you,